There is a person who came to mind the moment you saw the title of this message. You thought of someone else at first. You pictured them. Someone you know, someone you love, someone who has been through too much for too long and still shows up. You thought, this is for them. I should send this to them. And then something shifted, something quiet and almost involuntary. And for just a second, you paused. Because somewhere underneath that first thought was a recognition you were not quite ready to say out loud. The person you were thinking of is you. You are the one who has been through too much. You are the one who keeps showing up, even when showing up costs something. You are the one who carries a weight that other people in your life cannot fully see, and you have gotten so good at carrying it that most people around you do not even know it is there. You smile in the right places. You answer when they ask how you are doing. You move through the days with a competence that fools almost everyone, including sometimes yourself. But there is something in you that knows the difference between functioning and flourishing. And it has been a long time since the second one felt real. You were born for a battle, not a metaphor, not an idea. A real, sustained, costly, invisible battle that has required more of you than you were told it would. And the reason you are still here, the reason this message found you today of all days, is not a coincidence, and it is not an accident, and it is not luck. It is because you are one of the people that heaven has specifically strengthened for this kind of terrain. There are certain signs that mark the life of someone who was made for this kind of spiritual war. And if you are honest with yourself, you will recognize at least 3 of them in your own story. The first is that your battles have never been ordinary. Other people faced difficulty, but your difficulty has had a particular weight to it, a particular depth, as if whatever was coming against you knew exactly where to press. The second sign is that you have survived things that should have stopped you, and you cannot fully explain why you kept going. There was no logical reason to keep standing, and yet here you are. The third sign is that you feel things more deeply than the people around you. Their disappointment lasts a week. Yours goes to the bone. Their grief moves through. Yours sits still and teaches you something. The fourth sign is that you have always known, even in your lowest moments, that there was something you were supposed to do with your life, something specific, something that had your name on it, even when you could not see what it was. And the fifth sign is this: you are watching this message right now, not someone else. You. That is not a small thing. You did not stumble here. You were guided here by something that moves on your behalf, even when you are not watching, even when you are sleeping, even when you have stopped asking. You were created with a specific frequency, a specific purpose, a specific calling that was written before your name was spoken by another human being. The battlefield you are standing in was not assigned to you because you are weak. It was assigned to you because you are the one built to hold it. The people around you may have looked at your struggles and quietly wondered if you were going to make it. There may have been moments when you wondered the same thing. But those who are chosen for the hardest assignments are not chosen because they are invincible. They are chosen because they are being forged into something that ordinary comfort cannot produce. The fire is not punishment. The fire is the process. And everything you have walked through, every sleepless night, every relationship that did not work out, every door that closed in your face, every prayer that seemed to go unanswered, was not wasted. It was weight training for the soul. It was preparation for something that requires exactly the kind of person you have become. Let me say something to you that I want you to hold on to past the end of this message. You are not a person who is struggling to find their place. You are a person who is in the middle of becoming the what you were designed to be. The battle is real. The cost is real. But so is the calling. And so is the one who placed it in you before you ever had a chance to doubt it. You were not born into ordinary circumstances by accident. You were not given your particular history, your specific wound, your exact combination of gifts and grief by chance. Every part of your story was known in advance. Every chapter was accounted for, including this one, including right now, including the version of you that is sitting where you are sitting, feeling what you are feeling, still choosing to listen, still choosing to believe that something in this message might land somewhere true inside you. That choice matters. That posture matters. The fact that you are still here, still open, still willing to receive something, even when receiving has been hard, that is not weakness. That is the mark of someone who was built for endurance. And endurance is the quality that outlasts everything that was designed to stop you. This is not the beginning of your story. You are already deep inside it. But something is shifting in this season. And the shift is not small, and the shift is not slow. Heaven has not been delayed. Heaven has been deliberate. And the deliberateness of what is moving toward you right now is something you are going to understand more clearly than you have ever understood it before. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. There is something you have been carrying around for a long time now, and nobody has named it for you, not because they do not care, but because they cannot see it the way you can feel it. And one of the loneliest parts of walking a chosen path is that the very weight that marks you as different is also the weight that is hardest to explain to someone who has not felt it themselves. So today, before anything else, before the encouragement and before the instruction and before the revelation, I want to sit with you right here in what is true. I want to name what you have been living. There is a wave of grief that comes over you without warning. Not grief about one specific thing, but a wave that rises up from somewhere beneath the surface, usually when things are quiet, usually when you have a moment to actually feel instead of perform or manage or function. It catches you in the car, or in the shower, or in the space between putting your phone down and falling asleep. It is grief about time. It is grief about the version of your life you thought you would be living by now. It is grief about relationships that did not hold, about a confidence that used to come more easily, about a younger version of yourself that had not yet learned how much things could cost. And the strange and disorienting thing about this grief is that it does not always have a single face. Sometimes it just shows up as heaviness. Sometimes it just shows up as tired, and you push through it because you are good at pushing through. But the wave is real, and it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you have been in a long season and your soul is aware of it. The second thing I want to name is this. There are people and places in your life that used to feel like home, and somewhere along the way they stopped feeling that way. Not because something dramatic happened. Not always. Sometimes it was slow and quiet and almost imperceptible. But you noticed it. You sat in a room full of people who know your name and felt completely invisible. You had a conversation with someone who used to understand you and realized halfway through that the connection was not what it once was. You went back to a place that used to restore you and found that it no longer did. And instead of feeling relieved that you had outgrown something, you felt guilty. You wondered if something was wrong with you. You wondered if you were becoming someone difficult, someone disconnected, someone who could not be satisfied. But that feeling, that growing sense of not quite fitting where you used to fit, is not a character flaw. It is a directional signal. When a seed outgrows its shell, the shell does not feel comfortable anymore. That discomfort is not damage, it is expansion. The third sign I want to name is a dream, or not always a dream exactly, but a recurring image, a recurring theme, something that comes to you in the space between sleeping and waking, or sometimes in the middle of the day when your mind drifts further than you intended. There is a door in it. Sometimes the door is literal. Sometimes it is a threshold of some kind, a hallway, a gate, a crossing point. And in this recurring image, you are always on one side of it. You can see through it or sense what is on the other side, and there is something in you that knows the other side is where you are supposed to be. But the door does not open, or you have not yet stepped through, and you wake up, or you come back to yourself with a feeling that is equal parts longing and almost. That image is not random. That door is not symbolic decoration. It is your spirit showing you what your mind already knows, but has not yet been given permission to fully believe. The door is real, and it is not locked. It has simply been waiting for the right moment, which is a very different thing. The fourth sign is that you keep encountering the same message from different directions. A song comes on, and a particular line stops you completely. A stranger says something that reaches past the surface conversation and lands somewhere internal. You read a passage or hear something in a video, or someone who does not know you says something that sounds like it was written specifically about your situation. And it happens again and again. Different sources, different voices, different contexts, but the same message underneath all of them. Pay attention. Something is coming. You are closer than you think. Do not stop now. That is not coincidence. That is not your mind finding patterns in noise. That is the way heaven speaks to people who have been made sensitive enough to hear it. And the fact that the message keeps finding you through different channels in different forms is because the message is real, and the one sending it is determined to make sure you receive it. Now I want to talk about the harder things, the things underneath the signs. Because the signs are real, but so is the cost. And I am not going to rush past the cost to get to the comfort, because you have had enough people rush past the cost. You have had enough people tell you to focus on the positive, to count your blessings, to remember that someone else has it worse. All of those things may be true, but they do not touch the specific ache of sleepless nights when the anxiety that lives in your chest becomes louder than everything else. They do not address the loneliness that can exist even in a room full of people, even in a relationship, even in a life that looks from the outside like it should be enough. They do not speak to the feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood by the people who are closest to you, the gap between who you know yourself to be and who they seem to see when they look at you. Those things are real. The misunderstanding is real. The loneliness is real. The exhaustion of being strong because you have not been given permission to be anything else is real. And I want to say something about it that I hope lands somewhere deep in you. Being misunderstood is not a punishment. Being overlooked is not the final word. And the gap between who you are and who the world around you has been able to see is not evidence that you are wrong. It is evidence that you are ahead. There are two very different experiences that can look identical from the outside. One is being overlooked, being passed by, being placed at the back of the line by systems and people who did not see your value. And the other is being positioned, being placed exactly where you need to be for the next assignment, being held back from something that would have limited you so that you could be released into something that requires your full capacity. Both of them feel like waiting. Both of them feel like being invisible. Both of them can produce grief and confusion, and the kind of quiet questioning that happens in the dark when nobody is watching. But they are not the same thing. And the difference is not in the feeling. The difference is in what the waiting is producing. When you are simply overlooked, the waiting takes from you. It shrinks you. It teaches you to want less, expect less, ask for less. It makes you smaller over time. But when you are positioned, the waiting builds something in you that nothing else could have built. It develops a root system that will hold you when the weight of what is coming would have toppled a shallower version of yourself. It removes the dependencies that would have become liabilities. It teaches you a kind of trust that cannot be taught in comfort. And the painful truth is that from the inside, in the middle of it, positioned and overlooked can feel exactly the same. The only thing that distinguishes them is what you are becoming while you wait. And I want to teach you something about what you are becoming. You are not becoming smaller. You are not becoming someone whose best days were behind them. You are not someone who missed their window, or arrived too late, or accumulated too much history to be useful. You are becoming someone whose depth is exactly proportionate to the depth of what they were assigned. You are becoming someone whose capacity for empathy is not a burden but a gift, because the people you are going to reach will need someone who understands what it is to be in the valley and still choose to look up. You are becoming someone who cannot be easily shaken, not because you have not been shaken, but because you have been shaken repeatedly and found something in yourself that held. That something is not ordinary. That something is the signature of the one who placed a calling in you before you were aware enough to argue with it. And it has been holding you up, quietly, beneath the surface, through every season that was designed to take you out. You are still here, and that is not nothing. That is everything. So today, before you do anything else, I want to invite you into a moment of honest recognition, not performance, not forcing yourself to feel something you do not feel, just honest recognition. If any of what I have described sounds familiar, if the wave of grief is familiar, if the growing sense of not fitting is familiar, if the recurring image of the door is familiar, if the repeated message from different directions is familiar, then let yourself acknowledge it. Let yourself say, yes, that is me. Yes, I am in this. Yes, this is the season I am in. And if you are willing to do that, if you are willing to say yes to being seen in this moment, then type the words I receive in the comments below. Not because a comment changes your circumstances, but because there is something powerful about declaring out loud, even in a small way, that you are open, that you are here, that you are ready to receive what this season has been building toward. Type I receive. And while you are there, if this message has given you even one sentence that felt true, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear their own story named today. Like this video, so that the next chosen one who needs this message can find it. And if you want to go deeper into this community, subscribe so that the next message finds you before you have to go looking for it. You are not alone in this room. All across the world, right now, there are others who are watching this same message, recognizing the same signs, feeling the same relief of being seen. You walked in here carrying something heavy. You do not have to carry all of it out. There is a practice I want to give you today. Not a theory, not a concept to think about later when you have more time or more energy or more clarity. A practice, something you can do today, in the next hour, if you choose to, that will begin to shift the internal atmosphere of the season you are walking through. And I want to give it to you before we go any further, because everything that comes after that will land differently if you have something in your hands to hold onto. Want to call this practice the stillness protocol. That is its name. Not because the name is the important part, but because giving it a name makes it real, makes it something you can return to, something you can tell someone else about, something that belongs to you now and not just to this moment. The Stillness Protocol, 3 steps. Simple enough to do anywhere. Powerful enough to change the direction of a day, and over time, the direction of a season. Before I walk you through the 3 steps, I want to say something about why this kind of practice matters for someone who is living the kind of life you are living. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from always being the one who keeps everything moving, always being the one who holds it together, always being the one who shows up, who follows through, who does not allow themselves the luxury of falling apart, because too many things depend on you staying upright. And in that kind of life, the inner world gets neglected, not intentionally, not because you do not care about it, but because the outer world is louder and more immediate and more demanding. And over time, when the inner world goes unattended, something starts to dim, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. The way a fire goes low when it is not fed. You can still function, you can still perform, but something that used to brighten you has gotten quiet, and you feel the quiet even when you cannot name it. This practice is about feeding the fire, not with grand gestures or extraordinary effort, but with 3 minutes and 3 minutes and 1 final minute of quiet. That is all. That is the whole thing. And if you will give it to yourself consistently, in this season, I believe you will begin to notice something shifting in the way you move through your days. Not a dramatic shift at first, but a directional one. And direction is everything. Here is step 1. Think of something you are grateful it did not happen. Not grateful for what happened, grateful for what did not. This is different from ordinary gratitude, and the difference matters. Most gratitude practices ask you to look at what you have and say thank you. And that is good. But this step asks you to look at what you were spared and say thank you. Think of a door that closed, a relationship that ended, an opportunity that fell through, a path you almost took, a decision that did not work out the way you hoped. And instead of sitting in the grief of that loss, ask yourself a different question. What was I protected from by that not working out? What did the closing of that door keep me away from that I could not see at the time? What version of my life would I be living right now if that thing had worked out the way I wanted it to? This is not about pretending the loss did not hurt. It did hurt. You are allowed to hold both things at the same time. It hurt and it protected you. The relationship ended, and that ending created space for something your life needed. The door closed, and behind that door was something that would have diminished you rather than expanded you. The opportunity fell through, and something better was already in motion that required you to have your hands free. Sit with that for 3 minutes. Let yourself feel the relief of it, the specific, quiet, almost holy relief of realizing that something you grieved was actually something you were spared. That is step 1. Step 2. After you have sat with the gratitude of what did not happen, I want you to make a declaration, out loud if you can, under your breath if you must, but spoken, not just thought, because there is a difference between a thought and a spoken word, and that difference is not small. A thought stays inside you. A spoken word goes out into the room. It occupies space. It creates a vibration. And in the tradition of every ancient text that has ever taken language seriously, the spoken declaration carries a weight that the silent thought does. Not the declaration is this. Say it in your own words, but let the substance of it be something like this. I am not behind. I am not too late. I am not the sum of what I have lost or what has not yet arrived. I am positioned for what is coming. I am being held by something greater than my circumstances. And what has been promised over my life is not canceled by what I am currently experiencing. It is being prepared. Say that. Say something like that. Adjust the language to match your own voice, your own faith, your own way of speaking to yourself. But say it out loud, because the declaration is not just for you. It is for the atmosphere around you. It is for the part of you that has been listening to a different voice for too long. The voice that says you are behind, you are forgotten, you are too much or not enough. That voice has been getting airtime in the quiet, and the declaration is how you reclaim the airtime. Step 2. Now here is step 3, and this is the step that everything else in this message is building toward. After the gratitude, after the declaration, you are going to give yourself 7 minutes of silence. Not meditation in the way that word is usually used, because I know that for many of you, the word meditation carries associations that do not fit your spiritual framework. So call it stillness, call it listening, call it being present, call it whatever your tradition and your language allow. But the practice is the same. You sit down, close your eyes, you breathe slowly, and for 7 minutes you do not speak. You do not scroll. You do not plan. You do not review the list of everything that needs your attention. You simply stay still and let your nervous system, your mind, your spirit settle into a frequency that the noise of daily life does not allow. 7 minutes. That is the window. And if 7 minutes sounds too short to matter, I want to tell you something that a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years studying, something we are going to talk about in much more depth in just a moment. The brain does not require an hour of silence to begin shifting into its highest states of function. It requires consistency and the right conditions. And 7 minutes, done consistently, can begin to move the brain into the frequencies where clarity lives, where creativity lives, where the kind of knowing that goes beyond logic becomes accessible. 7 minutes is not a compromise. 7 minutes is the threshold, so the practice is simple. 3 minutes for gratitude of what did not happen. 1 minute for the spoken declaration. 7 minutes of stillness. 11 minutes total. You can do this in the morning before the day starts. You can do it at night when the house is quiet. You can do it in your car in a parking lot before you go inside somewhere. You can do it anywhere that gives you 11 uninterrupted minutes. And I want to challenge you to give it 7 consecutive days before you decide whether it is working. Not because 7 days is a magic number, but because 7 days is long enough to begin noticing a pattern and short enough that it does not feel like an impossible commitment. Now I want to say something about step 3 specifically, about those 7 minutes of silence, because this is where the practice connects to something much larger than a simple relaxation technique. Those 7 minutes are not empty. They are not passive. They are not you waiting for something to happen. They are you creating the internal conditions for something that has been trying to reach you. Because here is what I have come to understand about the chosen ones who are in the middle of a difficult season. The answers they need are rarely hidden from them. They are simply buried under too much noise. The clarity is there. The direction is there. The next step is there. But it cannot be heard over the constant hum of anxiety and obligation and digital overstimulation that fills the average day. Silence is not the absence of something. Silence is a frequency, and certain things can only be transmitted on that frequency. Certain kinds of knowing, certain kinds of peace, certain kinds of directional clarity that do not come from thinking harder or researching more or asking more people for their opinion. They come from the quiet. They come from the place inside you that only becomes audible when everything else has been turned down. And this is why the 7 minutes are not just a wellness practice. They are a spiritual discipline. They are the deliberate act of making yourself available to something that moves at a pace and on a frequency that the noise cannot interrupt. When you sit in the silence, you are not waiting for nothing. You are tuning yourself to the signal that has been broadcasting toward you this entire time. I know that for some of you, silence is not comfortable. I know that for some of you, the moment things get quiet, the thoughts that you have been outrunning all day begin to catch up. The worry surfaces, the grief surfaces, the fear surfaces, and the instinct is to reach for the phone, to turn on something, to fill the space before it fills with something harder to hold. I understand that. I am not asking you to sit with unbearable pain. I am asking you to sit with the truth that the pain is manageable, that you are stronger than the silence, that you have survived harder things than a quiet room, and that on the other side of 7 minutes, something will have shifted. It may be small, it may be subtle, but it will be real. Give yourself the 11 minutes. Give yourself the gratitude for what did not happen. Give yourself the spoken declaration. Give yourself the 7 minutes of stillness, and do it again tomorrow and the day after, and watch what begins to move. Because in just a moment, I am going to tell you about the science behind why those 7 minutes work the way they do. I am going to introduce you to research that will help you understand what is actually happening in your brain during those minutes of stillness, and why the chosen ones who learn to access certain brain states consistently find themselves operating at a level that other people cannot fully explain. There is a reason for it, and the reason is both ancient and scientific. And I think when you hear it, something is going to click into place that has been waiting to click for a long time. Stay with me. There is a reason the practice I just gave you ends in silence. There is a reason 7 minutes is not arbitrary. And before I tell you what that reason is, I want to say something that might sound unusual coming from a message like this one. I want to build a bridge between what you feel in your spirit and what researchers have been quietly documenting in their laboratories for decades. Because the truth is, the thing that makes you different, the thing that marks you as someone who was built for a specific calling, is not only a spiritual reality, it is also a neurological one. And understanding both dimensions of it will change the way you see yourself. Here is where the bridge begins. The chosen ones carry a specific frequency. That is not a metaphor. That is not poetic language designed to make you feel special without substance behind it. Researchers have identified brainwave states that correspond directly to the qualities that mark the people who have been set apart for significant purposes. Scientists call one of these states gamma, and what they have found about gamma is something that should stop you where you are. Gamma brainwaves operate at the highest frequencies measurable in the human brain. They are associated with what researchers describe as peak cognitive performance, moments of sudden insight, the kind of clarity that feels like a light being turned on in a dark room, and the integration of information across different regions of the brain simultaneously. Gamma is what neuroscientists have measured in the brains of long-term meditators, in people who report profound spiritual experiences, in individuals during what psychologists call flow states, those periods of extraordinary focus and creative output where time seems to move differently, and the work seems to come from somewhere beyond the ordinary mind. Gamma is not common. Most people, operating under chronic stress, chronic distraction, and chronic sleep disruption, rarely access it. But it is not inaccessible, and the path to it is shorter than most people think. Before gamma, there is theta. Theta brainwaves operate at a lower frequency, between 4 and 8 cycles per second, and they are the frequency of deep intuition, of the creative insight that surfaces just before sleep or just after waking, of the learning state that children operate in naturally, and that most adults have slowly lost access to as the demands of adult life have pushed them into higher, more reactive brain states. Theta is the frequency of the dreaming mind, and the praying mind, and the mind that is able to receive something from beyond its own immediate logic. And here is what is remarkable about theta. It is the bridge to gamma. When the brain is guided gently into theta, it creates the conditions for gamma to activate. And when both frequencies are present together, something happens in the brain that researchers have described as a kind of neurological symphony. Different regions of the brain communicating with each other at a depth and speed that does not happen in ordinary waking consciousness. Now, I want to tell you about a man who spent more than 30 years trying to understand this process and what it means for ordinary people living ordinary lives. His name is Dr. James Rivers, and he trained as a neuroscientist with research connections to some of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, including work linked to research programs at MIT and NASA. For more than 3 decades, Dr. Rivers studied the question of why some people seem to access states of mental clarity, creativity, and insight that others cannot, and whether those states could be made available to anyone, not just the rare individuals who seem to find them naturally. What he found, after years of research and thousands of hours studying brain activity across a wide range of subjects, was that the gap between those who accessed high-performance brain states and those who did not was not primarily a gap of intelligence or talent or even spiritual practice. It was a gap of frequency. The brains of people who consistently operated at high levels of clarity and creativity spent more time in theta and gamma states. And crucially, the research showed that the brain could be guided into those states through sound, through specific, precisely calibrated audio frequencies that the brain would naturally begin to synchronize with, a process called brainwave entrainment. Brainwave entrainment is not new. The principle has been studied for over a century, but the precision with which it can now be applied is the result of decades of refinement. The mechanism is straightforward. When the brain is exposed to a specific external frequency through sound, it has a natural tendency to synchronize its own electrical activity with that frequency. This is the same principle that makes you feel calm when you hear rain, or alert when you hear a sharp sound, or sleepy when you hear certain kinds of low, rhythmic music. The brain is constantly responding to the frequencies in its environment. Brainwave entrainment simply uses that natural responsiveness with intention and precision, guiding the brain into specific states that would otherwise take years of dedicated practice to access consistently. The specific techniques used include binaural beats, which work by playing slightly different frequencies in each ear, causing the brain to process the difference between them and naturally shift its own frequency toward that difference. And isochronic tones, which use rhythmic pulses of sound to guide the brain in a different but equally effective way. Together, applied with the precision that Dr. Rivers' research refined, these technologies can guide the brain toward theta and then toward gamma within a remarkably short window of time. A window that, in the final version of his protocol, Dr. Rivers identified as 7 minutes. 7 minutes is not a round number chosen for simplicity. It is the result of careful research into the minimum effective duration for initiating brainwave entrainment without causing the mental fatigue that longer sessions can produce. 7 minutes is the threshold at which the brain can begin the shift without being overwhelmed by it. And this is exactly why the stillness protocol I gave you in the last section ends in 7 minutes of quiet. Those 7 minutes, when supported by precisely calibrated audio, are not just rest. They are a neurological event. The tool that Dr. Rivers built from this research is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio track designed to be listened to with headphones. That uses brainwave entrainment technology calibrated specifically to guide the brain through theta into the conditions where gamma can activate. It does not require any prior experience. It does not require you to know how to meditate or to sit in a particular way or to have any background in neuroscience or spiritual practice. You simply listen, and the brain does what it was designed to do when given the right frequency. It synchronizes, it shifts, and it opens. I want to tell you about 2 people who used the Genius Wave during seasons that sound, in some ways, like the season you might be in right now. The first is a woman who wrote to Dr. Rivers after using the audio for 3 weeks. She had been in a period of extended professional stagnation, a season where no matter how hard she worked, nothing seemed to break through. Doors were not opening. Opportunities were not materializing. She described feeling like she was pressing against a wall that would not move. She began using the Genius Wave every morning as part of a 7-minute practice before she started her day. Within the first week, she noticed that her thinking felt cleaner. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Her mind was less reactive, less scattered. By the 3rd week, she received a professional opportunity that she had not sought, that came through a connection she had not anticipated, and that aligned precisely with the direction she had been trying to move toward for more than a year. She did not attribute it to magic. She attributed it to being in a different internal state, one that allowed her to recognize and respond to what had already been moving toward her. The second person is a man who began using the Genius Wave during a period of significant personal difficulty. He was navigating the aftermath of a relationship ending, managing a household alone, and trying to maintain professional performance under conditions that were quietly breaking him down. He described his mental state before starting as constantly behind, as if his brain were always 2 steps slower than the situation required. After our 2 weeks of consistent use, he said the most significant thing he noticed was not a dramatic external change, but an internal one. He felt present in a way he had not felt in a long time. He was able to sit with difficult emotions without being consumed by them. He was able to think clearly about his situation rather than just reacting to it. And from that place of greater internal clarity, the decisions he made began to produce different results than the decisions he had been making from a state of constant low-grade crisis. I know that some of you hearing this are doing the math right now, and I want to address what you might be thinking before you think it all the way through to hesitation. I know that $39 is not nothing. I know that in the season you are in, every expenditure is weighed. Every decision about where resources go is careful and considered, and that response is not irrational. That response is wisdom. You have learned to be careful because carelessness has cost you in the past. I honor that. I am not asking you to be reckless. I am asking you to consider this: the cost of remaining in a state of mental fog, of chronic low-grade anxiety, of the kind of cognitive flatness that comes from a nervous system that never fully settles, is far greater than $39. It is paid in missed opportunities, in relationships that suffer because you are not fully present, in the slow erosion of the belief that things can actually change. That cost does not appear on a receipt, but it is real. The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49 today through the link in the pinned comment below this video It is available for $39, and it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Not 30 days, 90 days. 3 full months to use it, to experience what it does in your life, and to decide for yourself whether it delivered what it promised. If it does not, you ask for your money back and you receive it. No complicated process. No questions designed to make you feel guilty for asking. The guarantee is real because the confidence behind it is real. 1 more thing before you go to the link. There are counterfeit versions of this product circulating online. Versions that use the name but do not contain the calibrated frequencies that Dr. Rivers' research produced. The only place to access the genuine genius wave at the guaranteed price with the genuine money-back policy is through the single link in the pinned comment below this video. Not through a search engine, not through a third-party site, only through that link. This is important. Do not let the availability of imitations cost you the experience of the real thing. The window for this pricing is not permanent. The number of units available at this rate is finite, and when it closes, it closes. If something in you is saying yes right now, I want to encourage you to honor that yes before the noise of the day talks you out of it. The link is in the pinned comment. It will take you less than 2 minutes to access, and what you receive on the other side of that decision may be the thing that shifts the internal atmosphere of this season more than anything else you have tried. Go to the link and then come back, because what comes next in this message is something I do not want you to miss. Before we go any further, I want to stay with something for a moment. I want to stay with the cost. Not the cost of the product I just told you about, but the cost of the season, the real cost. The kind that does not show up in any transaction history, the kind that gets paid in increments so small and so consistent that you almost stop noticing you are paying it, until one day you sit down and try to add it all up and you realize how much has been taken. I am not going to rush past this. I am not going to reframe it too quickly or wrap it in encouragement before it has had a chance to breathe. Because one of the most painful things about being in a long season is that the people around you are often in a hurry to make you feel better. They want to get to the silver lining. They want to move you toward the lesson, toward the gratitude, toward the faith statement that will wrap the difficulty in something more palatable. And sometimes what you need before any of that is for someone to simply sit down next to you and say, yes, this was hard. Yes, you paid a real price. Yes, what it took from you was real and it mattered and it is allowed to matter. So I want to do that now. I want to name what the waiting has taken, not to make you feel worse, but because naming it honestly is the first step toward carrying it differently. The waiting took relationships, not just the ones that ended, though those were real losses and they deserve to be grieved properly, but also the relationships that did not get built because you were in a season where your energy was so consumed by survival that there was nothing left over for the kind of slow, consistent investment that deep friendship requires. There are people who might have become some of the most significant relationships of your life, and they did not because you did not want them, but because you were operating at a deficit for so long that you could not show up the way you wanted to. You were present in body, but absent in some fundamental way that you could feel even when you were in the room. And the connection that might have formed in a different season, in a version of you that had more to give, simply did not happen. And you carry a quiet grief about that, about the relationships that were theoretically possible and practically out of reach. The waiting took the career, or not necessarily the career itself, but the trajectory, the version of the professional path that you had mapped out in your mind when you were still young enough to believe that if you worked hard and moved consistently and made the right decisions, things would compound in a predictable direction. And instead, the compounding did not happen the way you expected. There were interruptions. There were setbacks that took longer to recover from than they should have. There were periods where just maintaining what you had required everything you had, which meant that the building and the growing and the expanding had to wait. And time passed, and the gap between where you are and where you thought you would be by now is not something you can measure without a particular kind of pain. Not the sharp pain of a single failure, the slower, more complicated pain of a gap that widened gradually while you were too busy staying afloat to close it. The waiting took the freedom to dream big without immediately calculating the probability of disappointment. There was a version of you that could hold a large dream without immediately armoring it in caveats, without immediately thinking about all the ways it might not work out, without immediately shrinking it to a size that felt safer, more defensible, more realistic given the current evidence. That freedom, the freedom to want something wholeheartedly without the protective layer of preemptive lowering of expectations, the waiting took that, not all at once, but slowly, through a series of experiences that taught you that wanting too much was a form of vulnerability that cost more than it was worth. And so you learned to want carefully, to hope quietly, to dream in a register that would not humiliate you if it did not come true. And the waiting took trust. Not just trust in circumstances or trust in other people, but trust in yourself. The specific, irreplaceable confidence that comes from watching yourself make a decision and seeing it work out, from betting on your own instincts and being proven right, from moving towards something and arriving. When you have been in a long season of things not working the way you expected, something begins to erode in the internal confidence that powers good decision-making. You start to second-guess in ways you did not used to. You start to hold back in places where you used to move freely. You start to wonder whether the problem has been external all along, or whether something in you is broken in a way you cannot fully diagnose. And that wondering, that specific corrosive uncertainty about your own judgment, that is perhaps the most significant thing the long season takes. Because without trust in yourself, everything becomes harder. Every decision carries more weight. Every risk feels more dangerous. And the very capacity you need most in order to step into what is coming next has been slowly, quietly, painfully diminished. I want you to sit with that for a moment. I want you to let it be true without immediately reaching for the antidote. The relationships that were not built, the trajectory that did not compound the way you planned, the freedom to dream without armor, the trust in yourself that has been worn down. These are real losses. They deserve real acknowledgement, and you are allowed to feel the weight of them without immediately being required to be grateful for what they taught you. Now, I want to tell you about someone who knew this kind of loss from the inside. Someone whose story is ancient and yet sounds, in its essential texture, like something you might recognize from your own life. His name was Joseph, and I want to tell you only the hard part of his story right now, because the hard part is the part that usually gets skipped over in a hurry to get to the triumph. Joseph was a young man who had a dream. Not a vague sense of direction, but a vivid, specific, almost embarrassingly large dream about his own future significance. And the first thing that dream cost him was his family. The people who were supposed to be his safest place became his greatest source of betrayal. His own brothers, the people who shared his blood and his table and his childhood, looked at the size of what he was carrying and decided they could not stand beside it. And they did not just distance themselves from him. They sold him. They took the person they were supposed to protect, and they handed him to strangers for a price, and then went home and told their father he was dead. That is where I want to stop the story. Right there. Not at the palace. Not at the reconciliation. Not at the moment where it all makes sense and the tears flow and the meaning becomes clear. I want to stop at the pit. I want to stop at the moment when Joseph was in the hands of people who did not know his name, being carried further from everything he had ever known, with the sound of his brothers walking away still somewhere in his memory. I want to stop there because that is the moment that most of you know. Not the palace, the pit. And in the pit, there are no explanations. There is no voice from above saying, "Hold on." This is chapter 3 of 12, and chapter 12 is extraordinary. There is only the distance between where you are and where you were, and the complete absence of any visible path between where you are and where you are supposed to be. The dream is still inside you, but the distance between the dream and the current reality is so vast that holding both of them in the same mind at the same time requires something that goes beyond ordinary human endurance. It requires something that has to come from outside yourself, because you have already given everything you have from inside yourself, and it has not been enough to close the gap. What I want you to understand about Joseph in the pit is that the pit was not evidence that the dream was wrong. The pit was not a sign that he had been mistaken about his calling, or that the vision had failed, or that he should revise downward what he believed he was created for. The pit was the price, not a punishment, not a mistake, not a detour caused by bad decisions. The pit was the specific cost that this specific assignment required. Because the person who would eventually be needed in the palace could not have been produced in comfort. The wisdom, the restraint, the capacity for forgiveness on a scale that would have to carry the weight of a nation's survival, none of that could have been formed in a life that went smoothly from dream to destination. The pit was the curriculum, and the curriculum was brutal. But here is what I want you to carry forward from Joseph's story. Not the triumph yet, just this one thing. He did not stop being who he was in the pit. The dream did not leave him when his brothers did. The calling did not evaporate when the circumstances became impossible. Something inside him held, not because he was superhuman, not because he was free from fear or grief or confusion, but because the thing that had been placed inside him was more durable than the circumstances pressing against it. And that is the thing I want to name in you today. The dream in you is more durable than the season around you. What has been placed inside you has survived everything that has come against it so far. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every closed door, every season of the pit, and it is still there. Quieter maybe, buried under more weight. Harder to hear over the noise of everything that has demanded your attention. But it is still there. Because it was not placed in you by circumstances, and it cannot be removed by circumstances. What was placed in you is waiting, and the waiting, as hard as it has not been idle. It has been building something in the dark that the light is about to reveal. And that revelation, the moment when what has been forming in the hidden place finally becomes visible, that is what this season has been pointing toward all along. You did not lose the years. You invested them in ways you could not see the return on yet, and the return is coming. There is a word I want to give you, not an English word, an ancient one, and I want to give it to you not as a vocabulary lesson, but as a lens, because sometimes the reason we cannot see what is happening in our lives clearly is that we do not have the right language for it. And when you find the right word for your experience, something unlocks. The confusion does not disappear, but it reorganizes itself into something you can hold differently, something you can stand inside of rather than feel crushed beneath. The ancient Greeks had two completely different for time, and the fact that we have collapsed both of them into the single word time in our everyday language is, I believe, one of the reasons so many people in long seasons of waiting feel a particular kind of desperation that they cannot fully name. We have lost the distinction, and losing the distinction has cost us the ability to understand what is actually happening. The first Greek word for time is chronos. You have probably heard this one. It is where we get words like chronological and chronicle. Chronos is clock time, calendar time, the time that moves in one direction at a consistent and measurable pace, regardless of what is happening inside the moment. Chronos does not care whether the moment it is moving through is significant or ordinary, painful or joyful, wasted or transformative. It simply moves. 1 second after the next, 1 year after the next. Chronos is the time you feel when you are watching the clock. When you are calculating how many years have passed since you thought you would be somewhere else. When you are doing the arithmetic of delay and the numbers do not add up in your favor. Chronos is the time of the person who feels behind. The second Greek word for time is kairos, and kairos is something entirely different. Kairos is not measured in seconds or years. Kairos is the appointed moment, the right time, the fullness of time. Kairos is what happens when a moment carries within it something that transcends its ordinary duration. It is the moment when a conversation changes the direction of a life. The moment when a decision becomes possible that was not possible the day before. The moment when something that has been building invisibly for years finally breaks through the surface into visibility. Kairos cannot be scheduled. It cannot be forced. It cannot be manufactured by willpower or strategy alone. But it can be recognized, and it can be received. And the people who learn the difference between chronos and kairos stop measuring their lives only by the clock and start becoming sensitive to the quality of the moments they are moving through. Here is what I want to say to you about these two words and about your life right now. Everything you have been measuring in chronos, every year that has passed, every milestone that arrived later than you planned, every gap between where you are and where you thought you would be by this point on the calendar. That measurement has been real, and it has been painful, and I am not dismissing any of it. But it has also been incomplete, because it has been measuring the right things with the wrong tool. You have been using a clock to measure something that was never primarily a function of the clock. And when you measure the wrong thing with the wrong instrument, the reading you get back is not accurate, is just a number. And you have been making decisions about your worth and your progress and your future based on a number that was never designed to tell you what you most need to know. What you most need to know is this: you are not late in kairos. You may be behind on the chronos timeline you wrote for yourself in a younger season. But the kairos moment, the appointed time, the moment when what has been building in the hidden place breaks through into the visible, that moment is not measured by how many years have passed. It is measured by readiness, and readiness is not the same as calendar age. Readiness is not the same as accumulated time. Readiness is the condition of being fully formed for what the moment requires. And the forming takes exactly as long as it takes, not a day longer, but also not a day shorter. You are not being delayed. You are being prepared, and the preparation is happening in kairos time, which means it is happening on a schedule that looks nothing like the one you wrote for yourself, but that is perfectly calibrated to the weight of what you are being prepared to carry. Now I want to give you the second word, This one is Hebrew, and it is one of the most powerful words in the ancient text when it comes to understanding what waiting actually is and what it is actually doing in the life of someone who is called. The word is kava, and in most of our modern translations it is rendered as wait, as in, those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. But kava does not mean what we mean when we say wait. When we say wait, we picture someone sitting, stationary, passive, watching the door for something that has not yet arrived, waiting as the absence of action, waiting as the suspension of forward motion until something external changes. Kava means something entirely different. The root of the word carries the image of a rope being twisted, of individual strands being wound together under tension into something that becomes stronger as the twisting continues. Kava is the act of being braided, of being woven together, of having your individual threads, your experiences, your griefs, your gifts, your failures, your insights, your wounds, and your wisdom, wound together under pressure into something that has a tensile strength that no single strand could have carried on its own. When the ancient writers said kava, they were not describing a person sitting passively by a door. They were describing a person who is, in the middle of what looks like stillness, being actively transformed at a structural level, being made into something that can bear weight, being given a capacity that will only reveal itself fully when the load is placed upon it. The waiting is not the absence of progress. The waiting is the progress. The tension is not a malfunction. The tension is the mechanism. Think about what this means for the years you have been living. Think about the specific strands that have wound into you during this season. The strand of resilience that came from the relationship that ended and you survived it. The strand of discernment that came from the opportunity that looked right, but was wrong, and you learned to tell the difference. The strand of compassion that came from your own experience of being overlooked, which gave you an understanding of invisibility that will make you someone others can trust with their own stories. The strand of perseverance that came from continuing to move forward on days when nothing in you wanted to. Every hard thing was a strand. And the winding of those strands together has been producing something that is almost ready to bear the weight of what is coming. You are not being delayed. You are being assembled. And then there is this. The season you have been in has a name in the ancient language of the Spirit. It is called the wilderness season. And the wilderness has a specific function that is not punishment and not abandonment and not evidence that you have fallen out of favor. The wilderness is the place where transformation happens that cannot happen anywhere else. It is the place where the things that would have limited you are stripped away by the particular conditions of the terrain. The comfort that would have kept you small is not available in the wilderness. The applause that would have made you dependent on external validation is not available in the wilderness. The shortcuts that would have gotten you somewhere faster but less ready are not available in the wilderness. What is available in the wilderness is only what is essential. And what is essential, when everything else has been removed, turns out to be more than enough. The wilderness does not take from you what you need. It takes from you what you are carrying that was actually weight rather than resource. And when you come out the other side, you are lighter in the ways that were slowing you down and stronger in the ways that the assignment requires. Moses was in the wilderness for 40 years before he was ready for the thing his life was actually for. 40 years of what looked, from the outside, like a life going nowhere. A prince reduced to a shepherd, a man of position reduced to a man of obscurity. And then, in the middle of a completely ordinary day of doing a completely ordinary thing, the burning bush, the voice, the call, the revelation that the 40 years were not a detour. They were the preparation, the specific, irreplaceable preparation for a specific, irreplaceable assignment. I am not telling you that your wilderness will last 40 years. I am telling you that the wilderness has a purpose that the palace cannot provide. I am telling you that what has been formed in you in the hidden and difficult place is not less valuable than what would have been formed in the easy and visible place. It is more valuable because it was formed under conditions that produced a depth and a durability that ease cannot manufacture. The wilderness is not where you went wrong. The wilderness is where you are being made right for what comes next. And what comes next requires exactly the person that the wilderness has been building. There is one more thing I want to say about this season before we move forward. I want to speak to the part of you that is approaching exhaustion. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the deeper kind. The kind that comes from sustained uncertainty, from not knowing how much longer, from doing the right things and not yet seeing the return on them, from holding on without having a clear sense of what exactly you are holding on for. To that part of you, I want to say something very directly. The appointed time is real. There is a Kairos moment with your name on it that is moving toward you with a precision and an inevitability that your current circumstances are not capable of canceling. The rope that has been wound together in you through every hard season is almost at the tensile strength that the next chapter requires. The wilderness is doing its final work, and what Kairos has appointed, Chronos cannot prevent. You are not behind. You are being positioned. You are not forgotten. You are being held in the exact place that produces exactly the person that the next season needs you to be. The delay was never the final word. It was always the preparation. And the preparation is almost complete. Something is moving. I want you to feel that before I describe it, before I give you words for it, before I name the 3 areas where the shift is coming. I want you to simply sit with the awareness that something has already begun to move in your direction. Not because the circumstances have changed yet, not because the evidence is visible yet, but because movement in the spirit precedes movement in the natural, and that the fact that you are in this message at this moment with this particular awareness beginning to stir in you is itself a sign that the movement has already started. You do not need to create it. You need to recognize it, and recognition is what this section is about. There is a specific kind of knowing that comes just before a significant shift. It is not loud. It does not announce itself with certainty or confidence or the kind of bold clarity that you wish it would. It is quieter than that. It is a subtle but persistent sense that something is different in the atmosphere around your life, that things which were heavy are beginning, almost imperceptibly, to feel lighter, that a door you had stopped looking at is somehow catching your attention again, that a possibility you had filed away as too unlikely to hold on to is surfacing back into your mind without you having invited it. That is not wishful thinking. That is spiritual perception, and I want to encourage you to trust it rather than argue with it. Let me tell you about the first area where things are shifting. And I want to be specific, because vague encouragement does not serve you in the way that specificity does. The first area is the interior world. What is moving inside you? And I want to describe this carefully because the shift in the interior world is the one that most people miss. Because they are looking for the external change first, and they do not notice that the internal change has already begun. Here is what is coming in your interior world. A clarity that you have not had access to in a long time. Not the forced clarity that comes from pushing yourself to make a decision under pressure. Not the performed confidence that you have learned to put on when the situation requires it, but a genuine, settled, almost effortless sense of knowing what you value, what you are willing to carry, and what you are ready to put down, what direction you are supposed to move in, and what things you have been holding on to that no longer belong in the next chapter of your life. That clarity is coming. And when it arrives, it will feel less like a dramatic revelation and more like a remembering. Like something you always knew but had temporarily lost access to under the weight of everything else. The emotion that accompanies this shift is not always joy at first. Sometimes it is relief, the specific, quiet, almost exhausted relief of someone who has been holding a question for a very long time and finally receives an answer. Not the answer they expected, but the right one. And with the relief comes a kind of permission. Permission to stop carrying things that were never yours to carry permanently. Permission to stop explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand. Permission to stop waiting for the version of your life that was supposed to have happened by now, and to step fully into the version that is actually here, that is actually moving, that is actually aligned. What you were built for. What you should not do during this interior shift is rush it. Do not grab the clarity and immediately turn it into a list of action items. Do not take the relief and immediately convert it into productivity. Sit with it first. Let it settle. Let it do what it came to do in the interior before you ask it to perform in the exterior. The person who grabs the seed the moment it breaks the surface and holds it up to show everyone it has sprouted is the person who interrupts the growth before the roots have formed. Let the clarity take root before you hold it up to the light. What you can trust in this interior shift is that the knowing is real, that it is not coming from your own wishful thinking, that the settled sense of direction that is beginning to form in you is not manufactured by desperation. It is given. And what is given can be trusted in a way that what is forced cannot. The second area where things are shifting is in the relational landscape of your life. And this one is important to understand correctly, because if you misread it, it will feel like loss when it is actually alignment. Some people are going to leave your life in this next season. Not because of drama, not because of conflict necessarily, though sometimes that will be the surface mechanism, but because the version of your life that is emerging is not compatible with the presence of certain people who were right for a previous season, but are not right for what is coming. This is not a judgment on them. It is not a statement about their worth or their character or whether they deserve good things. It is simply a recognition that relationships have seasons, and some seasons end not because something went wrong, but because something is going right in a direction that requires a different kind of companion. The emotion attached to this is grief, and I want to honor that grief rather than minimize it. Losing a relationship, even one that has run its natural course, is a real loss. The familiarity is lost. The shared history is complicated. The routine of that presence is disrupted. And in the middle of the grief, it will not always feel like alignment. It will sometimes just feel like another thing that did not last. Allow yourself to feel that without deciding that it means what you fear it means. Because simultaneously, and this is the other side of what is shifting relationally, new people are moving toward your life. People who carry something that resonates with where you are going rather than where you have been. People who see you with a clarity that does not require you to perform or explain or diminish yourself to fit their framework. People who are operating at a frequency that matches the frequency you have been developing through the long season you have been in. They are not going to arrive all at once. but they are going to arrive. And when they do, there will be a recognition that feels almost immediate. A sense of having known them longer than the timeline allows. A sense of finally being in a room with people who understand the language you have been speaking in a place where no one else around you quite understood it. What you should not do in the relational shift is hold on to what is leaving out of fear of what is coming. The fear is understandable. When you have experienced enough relational loss, the instinct to grip what you still have, even when it is no longer serving you, is a natural form of self-protection. But gripping what is leaving will not make it stay, and it will make it harder to receive what is coming. Open hands receive more than clenched ones. What you can trust is that the people who belong in the next chapter of your life already exist. They are already on their way, and the clearing that is happening relationally is not a devastation. It is a preparation. Space is being made, and the space will not stay empty. The third area where things are shifting is in the realm of resources and opportunity. And I want to speak about this one carefully, because it is the area where the temptation to be either too skeptical or too credulous is strongest. Too skeptical sounds like, things have not worked out before, so I am not going to let myself expect them to work out now. And too credulous sounds like, things are about to be easy and abundant, and I do not have to do anything because it is all just going to arrive. Neither of those is the truth. The truth is in the middle, and it is more specific than either of them. What is shifting in the area of resources and opportunity is not that everything is suddenly going to be handed to you without effort. What is shifting is the quality of the alignment between your effort and its outcome. For a long time, you have been putting out significant effort and seeing returns that did not match the investment. You have been working hard in directions that did not produce proportionate results. And that gap between effort and outcome is exhausting in a specific way, because it makes you question not just the strategy but yourself. You start to wonder if the problem is you, if something fundamental about the way you operate is off, if the effort is the right kind or directed at the right things. What is coming is a season where the alignment improves, where the effort you put out begins to connect with outcomes that actually correspond to the quality and quantity of what you invested, where opportunities begin to surface that are matched to the specific combination of gifts and experience and wisdom and resilience that you have been building through the long season. You are not going to suddenly be exempt from effort, but the effort is going to start landing differently. It is going to start sticking in places where it kept sliding before, and the accumulation of those aligned efforts is going to produce something that begins to look, from the outside, like momentum. What you should not do in this shift is compare your pace of momentum to someone else's. There will be people around you who seem to be moving faster, accumulating more visibly, arriving at things that still seem out of reach for you. Comparison this season is a particular kind of poison, because it takes your eyes off your own lane at the exact moment when your lane is beginning to move. Stay in your lane. Watch your own ground, because what is growing there is specific to you, calibrated to your assignment, and not visible yet in its full form, even to you. What you can trust is that you are not going to have to fight for everything in the way you have been fighting. Some things are going to come to you, not as a reward for surviving the hard season, though you have survived it, but as the natural result of being in alignment with what you were designed to carry. When a key is the right key for a lock, it does not have to force its way in. It simply fits. And you are becoming the right key for doors that have been waiting for exactly your shape. Now I want to close this section with an invitation, because these three shifts, the interior clarity, the relational realignment, and the resource alignment. They are not things you need to manufacture, but they are things you need to be awake to. And being awake to them means choosing on a daily basis to look for evidence of movement rather than evidence of stagnation, not denial. Not pretending the hard things are not hard, but a deliberate practice of noticing what is beginning to shift, naming it when you see it, and saying thank you for it, even when it is small. If what I have described in these 3 areas resonates with something you are beginning to feel in your own life, if there is a recognition happening in you right now, a sense of yes, this is the season I am in, then I want to invite you to mark this moment. Type the words "I am ready" in the comments below, not as a performance, as a declaration, as the spoken word that says I see what is moving, and I am choosing to align myself with it rather than resist it out of fear. Type "I am ready," and then stay with me, because what comes next is something I want to place directly into your hands. Something just shifted in the room. I want you to feel that, because what I described in the last section, the 3 areas of movement, the interior clarity, the relational realignment, the resource alignment, those are not distant promises. They are present realities beginning to surface. And the reason I am saying that now, before anything else in this section, is because I want you to step into what comes next from a place of arrival rather than anticipation. You are not waiting for the shift to begin. The shift has already begun. And what I want to give you now is a name for who you are becoming in the middle of it. There is a specific identity that emerges from the kind of season you have been in. Not a generic identity, not a category that you share with everyone who has ever experienced difficulty. A specific one. One that carries the particular signature of someone who was assigned a particular kind of battle, endured a particular kind of cost, and came through it with something that only that specific terrain could have produced. And today I want to name it for you, because there is power in being named. Because when you know what you are, you stop spending your energy wondering whether you are enough of it. You are a cycle breaker. I want to tell you what that means, because it is not a motivational label. It is a description of function. A cycle breaker is someone whose life marks the end of a generational pattern. Every family, every community, every lineage carries cycles. Patterns that repeat across generations, not because the people in them chose them consciously, but because patterns have a momentum of their own, and they continue until someone with enough internal formation, enough spiritual clarity, enough endurance decides that the pattern ends with them. The cycle of fear that has moved through your family, the cycle of scarcity thinking, the cycle of broken trust, the cycle of people never quite stepping into what they were made for because they could not outrun what they inherited. Those cycles have been moving for a long time, and they have been moving toward you, not to crush you, to be stopped by you. The reason the battle has been so sustained is because what you are breaking is not small. You do not need a sledgehammer to break a twig. The scale of the resistance you have faced is proportionate to the scale of what is being broken, and what is being broken in your generation, through your life, through your willingness to keep standing when everything in your history said to sit down, is something significant, that the resistance it provoked was real and costly, and not something that a person who was not built for this particular assignment could have absorbed. This is why the suffering was not ordinary. This is why the battle felt personal, because it was personal. The patterns that are ending through your life knew exactly where to press. They pressed on your relationships, because relationships are where cycles perpetuate most easily. They pressed on your sense of self-worth, because a cycle breaker who does not believe in their own value will eventually stop breaking and start accommodating. They pressed on your faith because faith is the fuel that keeps a person moving when the evidence argues for stopping. And through all of it, you are still here, which means the cycle has not won, which means you are still functioning in the role that was written for you before you knew what role you were playing. I want you to sit with that, not as a concept to admire, but as a truth to inhabit. You are a cycle breaker. The patterns end with you. The inheritance that follows you will not carry what you were handed, because you chose, repeatedly and at real cost, not to pass it on. Now I want to walk you through something. I want to give you a guided moment of visualization, not a fantasy, not an escape from reality, but a deliberate act of seeing yourself accurately. Because one of the things that long seasons do is distort your self-perception. They make you see yourself through the lens of what has been hard, rather than through the lens of what has been formed. And I want to correct that distortion right now, in this moment, before you take another step. Close your eyes if you are able to, or if you are driving, or somewhere that requires your eyes to stay open. Simply soften your gaze and let your attention turn inward. I want you to picture yourself standing at a threshold, a doorway, not the closed door from the recurring image I mentioned earlier, a different one. This door is open. It is not ajar. It is fully, completely open. And the light coming through it is not harsh or blinding. It is warm. It is the kind of light that makes everything on the other side visible without obscuring any of it. Now I want you to turn around, just for a moment. Turn around and look at where you came from. Look at the terrain you crossed to reach this threshold. Look at the distance. Not to measure how far you have come in terms of achievement or arrival, but to see clearly what you walked through. See the seasons that were dark. See the places where the path was not clear. See the moments when you sat down because you could not figure out how to keep moving and then somehow stood up again. See the relationships that were seasons and not destinations. See the closed doors that felt like permanent verdicts but were actually redirections. See all of it, not with regret. With recognition, with the specific, quiet awe of someone who realizes that they crossed a terrain that required everything they had, and they crossed it anyway. And now I want you to notice something. You are not at the beginning of the threshold. You are not approaching it. You are standing in it. The threshold is not in front of you. It is where you are, right now. In this moment, you have already arrived at the crossing point. The door is already open. You are already inside the transition. And the only thing that remains is the step forward into what is already waiting on the other side. That step is not as large as you fear. The gap between where you are and where you are going is not the vast distance that the hard season made it appear. The hard season distorted your depth perception. It made things that were close feel unreachable, and things that had already arrived feel still absent. But the threshold is where you are, and the step forward is within your current capacity, not the capacity you will have someday, the capacity you have right now, today, in this body, in this season, after everything you have walked through. Now I want to speak directly to you before I close this section, not to the general you. To the specific you who is watching this message on this particular day with whatever is happening in your life right now. You have been faithful with things that were hard. You have shown up consistently for a calling that has not yet fully revealed itself. You have believed in something you could not yet fully see. And that kind of faithfulness, the kind that is exercised in the absence of visible confirmation, is the rarest and most valuable kind. It is the faithfulness that marks the people who are trusted with significant assignments. Not because they were perfect, not because they never doubted, but because they kept moving in the direction of what they believed, even when the evidence was thin and the resistance was real. So, I want to speak a blessing over you now, not a religious performance. A genuine, specific, heartfelt blessing from one person who has been watching what you carry and knowing what it has cost. May the clarity that has been forming in the hidden place begin to surface in the visible places of your life. May the relationships that belong in your next chapter find their way to you with a timing that surprises you with its precision. May the resources that match your assignment begin to align with your effort in ways that finally feel proportionate. May the interior quiet that you have been reaching for in the middle of the noise become more accessible to you day by day until it is not something you have to reach for, but something you carry with you. May the battle that has marked your life begin to show you its purpose in a way that makes even the hardest chapters feel like something other than waste. And may you know, with a knowing that goes deeper than information, that you were not alone in any of it, that the one who placed the calling in you was present in every season that tried to remove it, and that presence has not diminished. It has not wavered. It has not reconsidered. It has been constant, and it is constant now. You are a cycle breaker. The patterns end with you. The inheritance changes with you. And the people who come after you, whether they are your children or your spiritual children, or simply the people whose lives your life touches, they will carry something different because you were willing to carry what you carried and not put it down. That is not a small thing. That is perhaps the most significant thing a person can do with a life, to take what they were handed and choose, at real cost, to transform it rather than transfer it. You are doing that, you have been doing that, and you will continue to do that with greater clarity and greater capacity and greater support than you have had in the seasons behind you. Stand at the threshold. The door is open, the light is warm, and the step forward is one you are fully equipped to take. You are standing at the threshold. You know that now. You have felt it in the way this message has been landing, in the way certain sentences have hit somewhere deeper than information, in the way your spirit has been responding to words that were not written for a general audience, but for the specific person you are in this specific season. And because you are standing at the threshold, because the door is open and the light is real and the step forward is within your current capacity, I want to give you something practical to hold in your hands as you move through it. Not another concept, not another framework to think about. Something you can do today, this week, in the next 7 days of your actual life, your actual circumstances, with your actual resources and your actual limitations, because the person who was built for the kind of battle you have been in does not need to wait for perfect conditions to begin moving. They need a clear and honest and actionable direction. And that is what this section is about. 3 areas are shifting in your life. We established that in the last section: the interior world, the relational landscape, and the realm of resources and opportunity. And for each of those 3 areas, there is something specific you can do right now. Not to manufacture the shift, but to align yourself with the shift that has already begun. To position yourself inside the movement, rather than standing outside it watching. Let us begin with the interior world, the clarity that is coming, the settled knowing that is beginning to surface, the permission to step fully into who you are becoming. All of that is real. But it does not arrive automatically in a life that has no internal space for it. Clarity requires room, and in the average day of the average person who is carrying the weight you have been carrying, there is very little room. The day is full from the moment it begins. The demands are immediate and consecutive. And the interior world, the place where the clarity actually lives, gets whatever is left over after everything else has been served, which is usually very little, and usually very late at night when you are already too tired to do anything with what surfaces. So the practical step for the interior world is this. Create one protected space every day this week where nothing else is allowed in. Not a long space. 7 minutes. The same 7 minutes I spoke about earlier. The stillness that is not empty but full. The silence that is not passive but receptive. Find the moment in your day, morning before the noise starts, or evening after it settles, or the middle of the day in your car, in a quiet parking lot, and give yourself 7 minutes where the only agenda is to be still and let what needs to surface come to the surface. No phone, no input, just you and the quiet and whatever the quiet brings. If you have access to the genius wave audio that I spoke about earlier, use it during these 7 minutes. The calibrated frequencies will do for your brain in 7 minutes what would otherwise require considerably more time and considerably more practiced effort to achieve. They will guide your brain into the theta state where intuition and creative knowing become accessible, and toward the gamma state where the highest cognitive clarity lives. You will not have to force anything. The audio does the work of guiding. You simply need to be present for it. 7 minutes every day this week. That is the first action. Now let us move to the relational landscape, the shift that is happening here, the leaving of what belongs to the past season and the arriving of what belongs to the next requires something specific from you that may feel counterintuitive. It requires you to stop managing the relationships that are leaving. When a relationship has run its natural course, when the season of it is genuinely complete, there is a tendency to apply more energy to it, to try harder, to communicate more, to show up in ways that feel increasingly effortful and increasingly unreturned. And that effort, however well-intentioned, is often the thing that prolongs the pain of the ending rather than allowing the natural completion to occur with dignity and closure. The practical step for the relational landscape is this. This week, identify one relationship in your life that you have been working harder than the other person to maintain. Not a relationship that requires investment. All meaningful relationships do. But a relationship where the investment has become consistently one-directional, where you are the one who reaches out, the one who repairs, the one who adjusts and accommodates and makes room. And for this week, for just 7 days, stop reaching. Not with hostility, not with a dramatic announcement. Simply stop being the engine of the connection for 1 week and observe what happens. What you learn from that observation will tell you more about whether that relationship belongs in your next chapter than any amount of analysis or conversation. And simultaneously, this week, identify one person in your life who has been trying to connect with you and whom you have been too busy or too depleted or too distracted to properly receive. Someone who has reached towards you and found you present in body but absent in spirit, and reach back. Make one intentional, unhurried connection this week with someone who belongs in your next chapter. It does not have to be long. It does not have to be significant on the surface, but it needs to be genuinely present. Put the phone down. Look at the person. Listen in a way that is not just waiting for your turn to speak. Be actually there. That quality of presence is rare, and it is the foundation of the kind of relationship that will hold the weight of the season you are moving into. Now let us talk about the third area, the realm of resources and opportunity. And I want to say something here that is both honest and important. The shift in this area is real. The alignment is coming. But alignment does not mean absence of action. It means the action you take begins to connect with outcomes in a way that your previous effort did not. And in order for that to happen, there is something specific you need to do this week. You need to take one step in the direction of the thing you have been circling without committing to. The thing that you know is connected to your purpose. The thing that when you think about it, something in you responds. Not with excitement necessarily, sometimes it is too weighted with meaning to feel light, but with recognition, with the sense that this is the direction. You have probably been orbiting it for a while, thinking about it, researching it, telling yourself you will move toward it when the conditions are better, when you have more resources, when you have more confidence, when you have more clarity. But the clarity does not arrive before the step. The clarity arrives because of the step. Movement creates information that stillness cannot generate, and the step you take this week does not have to be large. It does not have to be irreversible. It does not have to be visible to anyone else, but it needs to be real. One concrete action in the direction of the thing that has your name on it. Make one phone call, send one message, sign up for one thing, submit one application. Write the first paragraph. Take the one step that your system has been avoiding, because taking it makes the thing real, and making it real means you can no longer protect yourself from the possibility of failure by staying in the realm of intention. Take the step this week, in this season, at this threshold. Now I want to say something about the pace of all of this, because I know that for someone who has been in a long season of delay, the temptation when things begin to shift is to accelerate, to try to make up for lost time, to compress the journey because you are aware of how much of the journey is already behind you. And I want to caution you against that specific temptation, not because urgency is wrong, but because frantic urgency is a different thing from intentional momentum, and they produce different results. Frantic urgency comes from fear, from the sense that you are behind and you have to run to close the gap. And decisions made from fear tend to be decisions that prioritize speed over alignment. And decisions that prioritize speed over alignment tend to produce outcomes that look like progress, but actually move you sideways rather than forward. The person who rushes past the threshold into the next season without honoring the transition tends to carry the unresolved weight of the previous season with them. And then they find themselves in a new chapter with an old burden, which is a particular kind of frustrating, because the chapter looks different, but something internal feels the same. Intentional momentum is different. Intentional momentum comes from clarity about direction and confidence about identity. It moves with purpose rather than panic. It chooses the next step, not because it is the fastest available option, but because it is the most aligned one. And the person who moves with intentional momentum does not cover ground as quickly in the first few days, but they cover ground that stays covered. They do not have to come back and redo what fear-driven speed left undone. They build something that compounds, rather than something that collapses. So this week, move with intentional momentum. Take the 3 steps I have described. Create the internal space in the 7 minutes of daily stillness. Make the one honest assessment of the relational landscape and the one intentional act of genuine presence. Take the one concrete step in the direction of your purpose. 3 steps. 1 week. And let the movement be deliberate rather than frantic, aligned rather than accelerated, rooted in who you know you are rather than driven by fear of what you might lose if you do not move fast enough. And here is what I want you to trust as you take those steps. You are not taking them alone. The one who placed the calling in you is not a spectator waiting, to see whether you figure it out on your own. The movement you make toward the purpose is met by a movement from the purpose toward you. When you take the step is supported. When you open the hand, something is placed in it. When you say yes to the direction begins to make itself clearer. This is not magic. This is the principle that has been true in every ancient account of every person who chose to move in the direction of what they were made for, rather than staying in the safety of what they already knew. You were made for more than survival. You were made for the specific thing that has been trying to find you through every door and every delay and every season that looked like the wrong one. And the time for moving toward it is not tomorrow. It is not when the conditions improve. It is now, in this week, at this threshold. With these hands, and this history, and this version of yourself that has been formed by everything you have walked through. Take the step. The ground will hold you. It was prepared for your weight. I want to begin this final section by saying something that I mean completely and without performance. Thank you for staying. Not in the polite way that people say thank you for watching at the end of a video. In the real way. In the way that acknowledges what it actually costs to stay present for a message like this one. Because a message like this one does not just ask for your time. It asks for your honesty. It asks you to sit with things that are difficult to sit with. It asks you to let certain words land in places that you have learned out of self-protection to keep guarded. And the fact that you stayed, that you did not click away when it got close to something real, that you let this message find you in the way it was designed to find you, that is not a small thing. That is showing up. In this season, when showing up has cost you so much, is an act of courage that deserves to be named. You came into this message carrying something. I do not know exactly what it was, but I know it was real, and I know it was heavy, and I know that for at least some portion of the last hour or so, you were not alone with it. And whatever happens after you close this video, whatever the day requires of you in the next hour, I want you to carry that with you. The fact that you were not alone in this room, because you were not. All across the world, right now, there are other people who were guided to this exact message on this exact day. People who are in the middle of the same kind of season. People who are at the same kind of threshold. People who recognized the same signs and felt the same relief of being seen. You did not find this message in isolation. You found it as part of a community of chosen ones who are all, simultaneously, waking up to the same reality. The battle is real. The calling is real. The strength is real. And none of you are walking into it alone. I want to give you a final exercise before I let you go. And I want to give it to you, not as an assignment, but as a gift. Something to do in the next few minutes, before the noise of the day rushes back in and reclaims all the space that this message created. I want you to picture yourself standing at the threshold one more time. The same open door, the same warm light. But this time I want you to picture something different at your feet. At the threshold, right at the edge where you are standing, there is a surface. And on that surface, arranged around your feet, are the things you have been carrying. All of them. Not just the ones you are consciously aware of. The visible burdens and the invisible ones. The grief you named and the grief you have not yet found words for. The fear that has shaped too many of your decisions. The disappointment that taught you to want carefully. The version of yourself that you have been apologizing for in quiet ways for longer than you should have. The expectation that you were not enough, not ready, not worthy of what you believed you were called to. All of it is at your feet. And now I want you to do one thing. I want you to look at it, not to analyze it, not to catalog it, not to feel guilty about any of it, or proud of how much you have endured. Just look at it. Let yourself see clearly what you have been carrying. Give it 10 seconds of honest, undefended recognition. And then I want you to leave it there, at the threshold. You do not have to carry it through the door. You were never meant to carry it through the door. The door is for you. What is at your feet belongs to the season that brought you to the threshold, not to the season you are stepping into. So leave it, not with drama, not with ceremony necessarily, just with the quiet, deliberate choice to step forward without picking it back up. You can look back at it if you need to. You can acknowledge it was real. But you do not have to reach down and gather it back into your arms as you cross into what is next. Leave it at the threshold and step through. That step is yours. No one can take it for you, and no one can stop you from taking it. Now I want to say something about this community and about what keeps it going. Every message I bring to this space costs something to create. Time, thought, and the kind of emotional investment that does not refill overnight. And I would not keep bringing it if I did not believe it was reaching the right people. But the reason it keeps reaching the right people is because of you. Because you share it with someone who needed it. Because you pass it to the person in your life who has been in a long season and has not had anyone name it for them. Every time you share a message like this one, you are not just helping a channel grow. You are sending a lifeline to another chosen one who is waking into their Monday without anyone to name what they are carrying. So if this message found you today, if even one sentence landed somewhere true in you, I want to ask you to do something that costs you 30 seconds. Share this video. Like it so that the next person searching for something real can find it. Subscribe so that the next message finds you before you have to go looking for it. And if you feel moved to support this work financially, if this community has given you something you want to invest back into, there is a way to do that, and it is linked below. Not because the message is conditional on your donation. It is not. But because the message continues because people who believe in it choose to sustain it. And I am grateful for every person who does. I also want to come back one final time to something I mentioned earlier in this message. The genius wave. I am not going to push it. I am not going to manufacture urgency around it in this final section. But I want to say this honestly and simply. If somewhere in the middle of this message, in the section about theta and gamma and the 7 minutes of daily stillness, something in you said yes. Something in you recognized that the internal clarity you have been reaching for has a neurological dimension that you have not yet addressed. Then that yes is worth honoring. The genius wave is not a replacement for the spiritual work this message has been inviting you into. It is a support for it. It is a tool that makes the 7 minutes of stillness more effective by guiding your brain into the frequencies where the deepest kind of knowing becomes accessible. And if that is something you want to explore, the link is in the pinned comment below. Not because I need you to buy, but because if it is a yes for you, it is waiting there for you. One more thing, and this is the last thing. You came into this message as someone in a battle. I want you to leave it as someone who knows what the battle is for. Not just that it has a purpose in a vague, theological sense, but that the specific battle you have been in has been producing the specific person that the specific assignment requires. The cycle breaker who ends what was handed down. The one who endures long enough to break what shorter endurance could not touch. The one who was formed in the wilderness so that they could lead others through it. The one who learned the frequency of the long season so that they could recognize it in someone else and say, I know this terrain, I walked it. And I can tell you that there is a way through. That is who you are. That is who the battle has been making you, and the making is almost complete. Go forward from this message differently than you came into it. Not because your circumstances have changed in the last hour. They have not. But because you have. Something has shifted in the way you see what you are carrying and where you are standing and who you are becoming. And that shift, small as it may feel right now, is the beginning of everything that is moving towards you. The battle was always yours to win. Not because winning was guaranteed to be easy, but because you were specifically designed for this specific fight, and everything you needed to carry it, the endurance, the depth, the capacity for empathy, the willingness to keep standing, has been formed in you through every season that tried to take you out. You were born for this battle, and God has been strengthening you for it every single day that you chose to stay. Go. The door is open. The light is warm. The ground on the other side will hold your weight. You are ready.